Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. I don't tweet yet. Question on the Facebook about my Twitter. I have an account. I will tweet and start tweeting by the end of this year. But when I do it, I'm going to do it and not stop. As I said, I got a lot of more. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Proudly on AFR Talk now, we give you our great guest, Hans von Spakovsky, former counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. He is the senior legal analyst at the Heritage Foundation and friend of Nothing But Truth. And Hans, before the break, we had the opportunity to hear Jay Carney, two clips from his statement regarding the waiving of the employer mandate. Now, we've gone over the economics of it. I want to talk about the legal argument that this is, hey, it's no big deal. I mean, you know, they're waiving it. We want this thing to work. Why doesn't everybody get in line like they did with the prescription drug benefit in 2004? Let's make this thing happen. Hans?
Well, I'll tell you, it actually is a sign of just how dismissive the administration is of the rule of law. Carney is saying it's no big deal, but it is a big deal. The president, under the Constitution, is supposed to execute and carry out our laws. He doesn't have the ability to simply ignore the law and waive provisions of it. And in fact, that was something that English kings did, and the British Parliament got very upset about that. And that's why our Constitution was written, to avoid that.
So this doesn't happen all the time?
No, it does not happen all the time. And his claiming, Carney's claiming that this happens all the time, it's just simply factually not true.
Okay. Now, relating waiving certain measures, within the legislation of the Senate bill, you have criticized the Senate bill, the amnesty bill, immigration reform bill, however you want to put it, pass the Senate, because you say it puts the government in charge, and specifically the government in charge of waiving certain enforcement measures. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you look at the Senate immigration bill, everywhere where it has some standard that, for example, illegal immigrants will have to meet before they can be given a legal permit to stay in the United States, every time you get to the end of that particular section or any other section, it has a provision that basically allows the Department of Homeland Security Secretary to waive those requirements. I mean, that is sprinkled throughout the entire bill so that all of the supposed requirements aren't really requirements.
And the Homeland Security Secretary is nominated and picked by
the president. It's currently Janet Napolitano, who has carried out the president's directives over the past several years to in essence, not enforce our immigration laws and to give a general amnesty to people who are here.
And just to see that this is a pattern, and I've said this before, but I think it needs to be stressed because people would say, well, this is all of a sudden, or maybe it's just one thing. When you mention our immigration laws, you're talking about what President Obama said he could not do in 2011 and did in 2012 when he, in essence, went over Congress's head to enact his own DREAM Act.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And, I mean, it's amazing to have the president acknowledge publicly that he couldn't do that legally, and then he goes right ahead and does it.
Yes, and this is, Hans, sometimes I know there are people in the audience saying, well, Crane, you just don't like the president. I don't know the president. I don't like the policies, and I don't like any president going beyond their power, even if I agree with the policy. And so this is an idea of what we want out of our government. And something that we don't want out of our government is somebody overstepping their powers. And
no, that's exactly right. And look, I didn't particularly like many of the policies of Bill Clinton, another former Democratic president, but I have to say I don't think Bill Clinton abused his executive power. in the way this president has and refuse to enforce specific provisions of the law or try to, through executive action, basically take a legislative position that Congress hadn't passed.
Another troubling thing that happened today that you have just written about, and I read the first opening paragraph, but I'll read it again. Judicial Watch released documents showing the latest abuse of power by the Department of Justice, helping, quote, organize and manage rallies and protests against George Zimmerman trial and the shooting and death of Trayvon Martin, and he's been charged with second-degree murder in Florida, and the trial it's a lot of people are looking at it like the OJ trial, and they can't turn away. You can go the Aries trial as well for some, I guess. But what you're saying is this is pretty shocking. You're saying the Department of Justice helped organize and manage rallies and protests. What is this about, Hans?
Well, there's this office at the Justice Department. I actually worked with it when I worked there, called the Community Relations Service. This was set up by one of the Civil Rights Acts, and their whole purpose in life is whenever there are racial tensions, a racial incident in a particular community, their job is to go down there and act as impartial moderators, not taking sides, but basically trying to calm the situation and get everybody working together. Well, according to these documents, the Community Relations Service went down to Sanford, Florida, and was helping train protesters, organizing protesters, the exact opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. I was just shocked when I saw this, and it shows the kind of, unfortunately, the kind of bias that exists in just too many employees of the Department of Justice.
You were a part of exposing the abandonment of the race-neutral policy at the Department of Justice under Eric Holder. What that means is when you go race-neutral means, hey, you don't let race play a factor. It doesn't matter. All equal under the law. That was abandoned under the Attorney General, Eric Holder's Department of Justice. J. Christian Adams wrote a book about it. You've commented on it. Now we have this. What does this demonstrate, Hans?
Well, it's really an abuse of power for the Justice Department to be fomenting public protests when there is a murder investigation and prosecution going on. It is just so unethical. I said I'm just shocked at it, and I can tell you right now. In fact, I can guarantee it, Crane, that everybody believes, all the commentators believe that Zimmerman is probably going to be found innocent by the jury looking at his case. I can guarantee you that there are now prosecutors in the Civil Rights Division who are looking at whether, even if he's found innocent, they can then indict him on federal charges because frankly, they're biased in this case. The facts don't matter, and they want him to go to jail. And they will probably come up with federal charges against him.
Do we have a racist Department of Justice?
Yeah, I think we do. I think they show their bias in that area all the time, and particularly the Civil Rights Division, which, as you said, they don't have a race-neutral approach to enforcement of federal discrimination laws.
And that creates an environment. I mean, for people, obviously, the history's not there with the oppression of black Americans over the centuries, okay? But if we look at 65 on, and we go from there, and we see today, 2013, we certainly don't live in the same society we did in 2013 as we did in 1965, which brings us to the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, of 1965. And my question is, Hans, there was a measure within there, I believe Section 5, or Section 4, and the Supreme Court made a decision on striking that section. What was that section, and what does it mean for America?
This was the Shelby County case out of Alabama, and the court said that Section 5, the coverage formula for it is unconstitutional. What that means is Section 5 says that a small number of states, Georgia's one, Mississippi's one, they can't make any changes in their voting laws without getting the pre-approval of the federal government. It's an extraordinary intrusion into state sovereignty. And when Congress renewed that law in 2006, they did it based on 40-year-old data. They did it based on what had happened in the 1964, 1968, 1972 elections, which is just irrational. As
okay, real quick, Hans, just to interject with some of the numbers. Alabama voter registration rates for whites 69%, 19% for white, black, respectively. 2004, 73% to 72% white, black, respectively. So they were going on data that was obviously outdated.
Yes, completely. And like in places like Mississippi, actually blacks register and vote at higher rates.
76 to 72.
And what the court said was, today's South is not the old South. History did not stop in 1965, and yet that's exactly what the Department of Justice tried to argue in the case, was that things hadn't changed, and this law was still justified today based on what had happened 40 years ago.
Final question, real quick. Going to 20 weeks as opposed to 22 weeks, I heard an argument against the Texas law that passed the House, that Roe v. Wade says 22 weeks. Is there going to be a contest there in the future when it's passed? Oh,
sure. I think there will be a litigation contest. But, it's just amazing. Pro-abortion people are just going crazy over this Texas law, and it's not that strict. It simply says that we're not going to have late-term abortions, and something you would think people would want, that abortions can only take place in surgical centers.
Right.
Where you've got doctors with hospital privileges. Don't you want high-quality medical care when that kind of operation is being done? And yet they're against that. To me, that's just astonishing.
It is astonishing. And Hans, I'm astonished because every time I talk to you, I run out of time because you're just that good. Thank you so much, my friend. Take care.
Sure
Live with honor in your life, passion in your heart. Always keep the faith in Jesus Christ. Crane Durham, something but truth. AFR Talk. Go to the Facebook page.